Hello and welcome to Tuesday in Parliament. The main news from Westminster. Senior MPs quiz Theresa May over whether Parliament will get a vote on her Brexit plan.
It's my intention that Parliament should have every opportunity to consider these matters, and what I'm also clear about is to ensure that we actually deliver on the vote of the British people, which was a vote to leave the European Union.
OK. Again, was that a yes or a no?
I gave the answer I gave, Chairman.
Rupert Murdoch's bid for full control of the broadcaster Sky. The former Labour leader wants it to be stopped.
This bid shows the Murdochs have learnt nothing and think they can get away with anything. If it was wrong for the Murdochs to own 100% of Sky in 2011 and 2012, it is wrong today.
And a lesson in good manners.
I reached my breaking point, so I grabbed her mobile and I threw it into the audience across the aisle. And I saw it bouncing off the head. It could have been a Frenchman, it could have been anybody.
But first, the lorry attack in Berlin was on the minds of MPs as they met for the last sitting day before the Commons breaks up for Christmas. 12 people were killed and 48 injured when a lorry ploughed into a Christmas market in the German capital. The German police are calling it a probable terrorist attack. In the Commons, before the day's business got underway, the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt was the first to speak about events in Berlin.
As we wish each other a Merry Christmas, the whole House will also this morning remember the people of Berlin as they face up to yesterday's horrific suspected terrorist attack. Germany and its capital Berlin have been beacons of freedom and tolerance in modern times, and all our thoughts and prayers are with them today.
Comments echoed by Theresa May at the start of her session with the Liaison Committee.
I would just like to take a moment to reflect on the appalling news that came in from Berlin and Ankara yesterday. And we've seen very vivid images on our newspapers and television, and I think they've shocked us all. And I just wanted to express our condolences. I'm sure the condolences of all of us are with those who mourn and all those who've been affected, and we hold them in our thoughts today.
It was Theresa May's first appearance in front of the Liaison Committee, which is made up of the chairmen and women of the Commons committees. No surprises that the main subject up for discussion was Brexit. Among other things, they wanted to know if MPs would be given a vote on the final deal with the European Union.
Is it your intention to ensure that Parliament has a vote on the final deal when it's been negotiated?
Well, the Parliament is going to have every opportunity to vote through the Great Repeal Bill on the various aspects of the relationship that we will be having with the European Union.
That wasn't quite the question. The question is, when the final deal is negotiated with the 27, is it your intention to ensure that Parliament has a chance to vote on that deal, yes or no?
It's my intention to ensure that Parliament has ample opportunity to comment on and discuss the aspects of the arrangements that we are putting in place.
I'm not sure I understand why it's so difficult to answer a question as to whether Parliament will have a vote or not, given that we know the European Parliament will have a vote on the deal. Why can't you say that the British Parliament will also have a vote?
Well, what I'm saying is that there will be an opportunity for Parliament, of course, to consider, as we're going through, when more details do become available, how this is going to operate. There is a question about the timetable in relation to the agreement of the deal and the necessity, how that timetable will operate in relation to the European Parliament as well. What I'm also clear about is ensuring that when we come to the point we are actually delivering on the vote of the British people, which is that we will be leaving the European Union.
The Prime Minister was then challenged over whether she would use Brexit to reduce immigration.
If you're to stand any chance of meeting your net migration target, you would have to get EU net migration down to what, 50,000?
We will be putting into place the immigration arrangements for people coming within the European Union that we believe are in the interests of the United Kingdom.
So does that mean that if you conclude that it is not in the interests of the United Kingdom to get net migration from the EU down to 50,000, you will ditch the net migration target, Or will you give the net migration target priority over what is in Britain's best interest in the negotiations?
This government will retain its intention of bringing net migration down. We do that.
To the tens of thousands.
We aim that. We set out very clearly for some time now that we believe it's sustainable levels, and sustainable levels are in the tens of thousands. And we do that for very good reasons, because of the impact that we believe immigration does have, and that research has shown does have on people, particularly those at the lower end of the income scale, on keeping pay down.
All of that may be the case. I understand the reasons behind it. I understand the reasons. The question is, what is your objective going forward? You've got a net migration target to get below the tens of the thousands. I'm simply asking you whether you are planning to meet that net migration target through the Brexit negotiations. And if so, what are you aiming for on net EU migration? If you've got to get it down from 189,000 to below, at least below 100,000, who do you want not to come?
And you have asked me about the Brexit negotiations, and I've been clear about the Brexit negotiations. The vote on the 23rd of June from people was that they wanted us to have control of immigration, to put in place controls of immigration for people coming from the European Union. We also want to ensure we get the best possible deal for trading with and operating within the European Union.
One MP wasn't sure she'd given a clear answer on giving Parliament a vote.
Is it your intention that Parliament should vote on a final deal once it's been negotiated? This was a question put to you earlier.
It was a question put to me earlier, and what I've said is that it's my intention that Parliament should have every opportunity to consider these matters, and what I'm also clear about is to ensure that we actually deliver on the vote of the British people, which was a vote to leave the European Union.
Okay. Again, was that a yes or a no?
I gave the answer I gave, Chairman.
Okay. I'll leave people to decide on that one as well.
And there were questions on another pressing issue, social care.
There's now around 1 million people who should be entitled to social care who are not receiving it, putting great pressure on them and their families. The reason? Real term spending on social care fell by 9% over the last Parliament. To use a form of words with which you might be familiar, do you agree that for social care, crisis means crisis?
As I've said previously, I accept that there are pressures on social care. That's why the government has made available the opportunity for local authorities, as was set out in the local government finance settlement last week, the opportunity for extra money to be available to be spent on social care. But there is also a question not just about those short-term pressures, but in the medium term, ensuring that we're seeing delivery and best practice being introduced in terms of delivery of social care across the country. You talk about fewer people being able to access social care. Actually, there are many local authorities around the country where we're now seeing more people accessing social care.
Clive Betts told her he would be very interested to see those figures. Now, 4 years ago, Rupert Murdoch failed in his ambition to take full control of the broadcaster Sky. He abandoned his plan because of the public outcry over phone hacking at one of his newspapers, The News of the World. But now Mr Murdoch is having another go at taking 100% ownership of Sky via his company 21st Century Fox. There's been no formal notification of the takeover bid. When that happens, the Culture Secretary, Karen Bradley, will have 10 days to decide whether to refer the proposal to the broadcasting regulator Ofcom. Karen Bradley told MPs that because of her quasi-judicial role, she wouldn't be able to comment further. But Ed Miliband, who's been very critical of Rupert Murdoch before, told the Commons it was an urgent matter.
We are going into recess until January the 9th, and the bid may be notified to government at any time. And it is very important, Mr Speaker, that the House understands the reality that in even launching this bid for 100% of Sky, the Murdochs are seeking to turn the judgment of this House, the regulator, and indeed the country on its head. Yes. In 2011, this House unanimously urged the withdrawal of the bid for Sky by Rupert Murdoch. In 2012, Ofcom published a damning assessment of James Murdoch's behaviour in the running of News International. Mr Speaker, that report only stopped short of declaring Sky as unfit and improper to hold a licence on the basis that the Murdochs were a minority owner of Sky, not 100%, and James Murdoch was no longer playing an executive role at Sky. Today, James Murdoch is back as chairman of Sky and chief executive of 21st Century Fox. This bid shows the Murdochs have learnt nothing and think they can get away with anything. If it was wrong for the Murdochs to own 100% of Sky in 2011 and 2012, it is wrong today.
I do not, for 1 second, underestimate the huge public and parliamentary interest in this proposed merger, as well as the importance of this issue to the parties concerned. But the important thing is that I must ensure, given my quasi-judicial role, that I protect the integrity of the process and ensure that as and when, if a formal notification is given, that is properly considered. I will be making no further comments on the merit of the bid at this stage.
While there may well be a case for asking the regulator to look at this bid, will she also recognise that this represents a £12 billion investment into a British company and is a vote of confidence that Britain will remain a centre of international broadcasting after Britain leaves the European Union?
We've seen this bid before. I know Christmas is a time for TV repeats, but this one wasn't a hit the first time round, and it's no more popular now. Mr. Speaker, now last week the Minister of State told the House categorically that the Prime Minister had not discussed this bid at a recent New York meeting with Rupert Murdoch. Will the Secretary of State repeat that assurance? How does she know? Can she tell us what was discussed? Because after all, Leveson recommended that those meetings should be minuted. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, Rupert Murdoch wrote to The Guardian to say, "I have made it a principle all my life never to ask for anything from any Prime Minister."
Secretary of State.
We'll just pause to take that in a moment, Mr. Speaker. Now, you will recall John Major's testimony to the Leveson inquiry, in which he recalled Rupert Murdoch asking him to change his party's policy on Europe, and warning that if we couldn't change our European policies, his papers could not and would not support the Conservative government. Does the Secretary of State believe Rupert Murdoch or the former Conservative Prime Minister?
He's asked specifically about the meeting that the Prime Minister held in September. She had a pre-arranged meeting with Wall Street Journal editors. Mr Murdoch dropped into that meeting, and I can assure him that the proposed takeover was not discussed.
So who do you believe?
Mr Philip Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not entirely sure that a company controlled by Rupert Murdoch trying to buy a other company largely controlled by Rupert Murdoch is of the great public interest that the Secretary of State seems to think it is. This really is all about the party opposite not liking Rupert Murdoch. If this was Richard Branson in the same situation, they wouldn't be saying a word about it.
A substantial number of my constituents have contacted me over the last week regarding this bid, and they are all of the same opinion that Mr Murdoch has too much of an influence over our media. Many would like to see his bid being referred to Ofcom for that very reason.
Karen Bradley apologised, saying she couldn't make any comment on the process or the merits of the bid. You're watching Tuesday in Parliament with me, Christina Cooper. The Foreign Affairs Committee is investigating the UK's relations with Russia. With events in Ukraine and Syria, as well as Russia's engagement in cyber warfare, there's much to discuss. But at the start of the session, the Europe Minister, Sir Alan Duncan, gave his reaction to the murder of Russia's ambassador to Turkey.
We obviously fully condemn this. It's a heinous attack, and you can be assured that the Foreign Office in the proper way has been in contact both with our Turkish and our Russian counterparts to express our condolences.
The committee moved on to Russia's interference in international affairs.
There is now a very strong suggestion and being investigated by the CIA that the US election was interfered with by Russia to assist their Manchurian candidate. There are, for example, today, United Russia, Putin's party, has signed a memorandum of agreement with the Nazi-linked Freedom Party in Austria. Isn't there a pattern of behaviour here of undermining the values of the democratic, liberal, open-minded Western model, whether it's in the US or in the European Union, and that Russia is pursuing asymmetric warfare to undermine the solidarity of NATO and the European Union?
I think there's no doubt that using modern technology, they are interfering in many parts of the world. We also saw it in Montenegro, where there was a very serious interference, I think undeniably Russian-inspired, if I can put it that way, in the democratic process in Montenegro. Quite what the effect was, or what exactly they did in the United States is unclear. But I think there is no doubt, and we just have to accept it as a fact, that cyber warfare is now a part of modern life, and the Russians are using it as best they can in a political dimension, not just in the commercial one, but there is political interference. Obviously, we had our Litvinenko difficulties, so in terms of our personal relationships, there have been impediments, and there have also been issues which we feel very strongly about, such as Ukraine and subsequently Aleppo. And we need to balance the respect they deserve with firm talk about the things of which we thoroughly disapprove. So I hope, actually, that the balance of language and action is finding its feet, perhaps a little bit more than it has done in the past. And our attitude, and it's in the paper I gave the committee to start with, is one of, very firm views where we think they are behaving improperly, such as challenging other countries' territorial integrity, but showing them the proper respect which a great nation is due. And that is the balance. Perhaps we could strike it better, but that, I think, is the balance we have to strike.
Labour's Anne Clwyd described a meeting between the committee and the Russian ambassador to London when the bombardment of Aleppo was raised.
He was asked about the bombing of hospitals, and his answer to that was that there are no hospitals in Aleppo. So we asked, well, what are they then? And he said there were jihadist training camps. Now, how do you develop a dialogue when people are dealing with so-called their facts as opposed to our facts?
Yes, I like to think that we in our politics live in a rational world, and we value the truth. And one of the things that we set store by is knowing when someone is not telling the truth. And I think in this conflict there are clear and obvious occasions where people are just not telling the truth and saying black is white when it isn't. And I think in the issue of Aleppo there are many such examples, and they're very distressing. And that's where we have to show the courage, I think, and the leadership to have clear views, point out truth from fiction, and stand our ground. And that, I hope, is what the UK is doing. And we're having to do so, let's be absolutely frank, with Russia in a number of areas. Aleppo, Ukraine are two main examples. And we will not be pushed around and be told that what we believe to be the truth is not. We will try and tell the truth and advertise the truth and make it clear. And that's what we will do, and that is one of our main weapons of diplomacy.
The Europe Minister, Sir Alan Duncan. The government has admitted that there are serious problems in the way the leasehold system works in England and Wales. Conservative and Labour MPs told the Commons some of their constituents had seen ground rent charges rocket, in some cases to levels where their houses became unsellable.
What we are discussing today is nothing short of a national scandal. It is the PPI of the house building industry. Every now and again, a sharp practice comes to light which is totally unconscionable, and which every reasonable person looking at it would say, we cannot allow this to continue. Parliament must act. This is one such occasion. The practice that has developed is to sell new homes on a long-term lease with a misleading low ground rent and buyout price. This practice has become common in my constituency over the last few years, and contrary to what is asserted by some developers, it is not a tradition in my constituency. It now seems to be part of the business model for a great many developers. It's a very clever way of selling more units, drop the asking price a little to reflect the fact that it is a leasehold, but fail to make it clear that in the long run the homeowner will pay far, far more than they would have done if the property had been freehold.
My calculation is if a £250,000 house has a £250 ground rent that doubles every 10 years, over 60 years, the successive leaseholders will have paid £157,500, and for that still to be 1% of the value, the house would have to be worth £80 million. That's in the first 60 years of a lease.
Sadly, there are still too many bullies, cowboys and crooks in the centre, and for the government to feel comfortable with the legislation as it stands is unacceptable. We need not only better regulation, we need not only better protection and advice, we need legislation. There are millions of citizens out there looking to their politicians of whichever party to remedy their distress.
Would my honourable friend agree that many people entering these leaseholds are entirely unaware that the landlords have the power to make huge increases in ground rents, and that if this practice is deemed acceptable, at the very least, tenants going into these agreements should have very clear information about what the landlords can do, what their rights are, and how they can challenge them?
When one's worked hard to save up to buy a home, budgeted to be able to pay the costs needed to service any loan and the other costs one reasonably expects, one should then expect security and then be able to plan for one's future. The hard-working people, those who are doing the right thing by investing their hard-earned cash into buying a home, are being ripped off left, right and centre. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government must act urgently to stop this gross exploitation of hard-working homeowners who are finding they cannot sell their homes.
It seems to me and to the Secretary of State to be one of those cases where there is a gulf between the letter of the law and our sense of what is right. Some of the cases we've seen in the media and heard about in today's debate have highlighted some truly appalling behaviour. The Secretary of State and I have been looking closely at the issues raised in recent weeks, and I can tell the House that we are both absolutely determined to stamp out unfair, unjust and unacceptable abuse of the leasehold system.
To the House of Lords now, where the day started with some housekeeping news. The Leader of the Lords, Lord Fowler, announced a new inquiry into ways of reducing the size of the upper chamber.
On December 5th, the House debated a motion in the name of Lord Cormac on the size of the House. The motion sought agreement that the House believed that its size, and I quote, should be reduced and methods should be explored by which this could be achieved. 61 members spoke during the debate and the motion was carried unanimously. A feature of many of the speeches that day was that we should not delay in such an examination. Accordingly, I'm setting up a 6-member Lord Speaker's committee, drawn entirely from the back benches, to examine the possible methods by which the House could be reduced in size. I'm pleased to announce that Lord Burns has agreed to chair the committee, and that other members of the committee will be Lord Beath, Baroness Browning, Baroness Crawley, Baroness Taylor of Bolton and Lord Wakeham. The committee will get down to work as soon as the House resumes after the Christmas recess. I would just add that this is not an easy task, but hopefully, if this issue can be settled, the public will be better able to recognise the true value of this House.
One of the roles that the Lord takes very seriously is debating statutory instruments. They're the means by which the government can amend the law without a new Act of Parliament. Peers have been discussing a measure to increase the number of penalty points imposed when a driver is caught using a mobile phone. One peer said using a mobile phone was a breach of good manners and gave a vivid example.
Now, if the House will just indulge me, I'll give an experience. I'll give my own experience with my goddaughter, aged 21, who I took with her parents to the theatre in Paris, actually. And just about the time, it was a well-known singer in France who was giving us an evening, and just as the star came on and the lights went down, my goddaughter saw fit to send a text to somebody which created a light on the machine, which, and I quickly reminded her, I said, you may upset a few people here with the light, please put it off. And she ignored me and went on doing it.
Despite his requests, she continued using the phone.
I reached my breaking point, so I grabbed her mobile and I threw it into the audience across the aisle. And I saw it bouncing off the head. It could have been a Frenchman, it could have been anybody. Back into the aisle. She was totally astonished by my behaviour. Her aunt, who was also with us, said round the back, well done, I've been longing to do that for a long time. And I can tell, noble lords, that my goddaughter the other day, who's now 25, she was 21 at the time, said, because I remarked she had her mobile telephone with her, I said, is that the same one I threw into the audience? She said, yes, it is actually. She said, that was a salutary lesson. She said, I've never forgotten it.
Lord Falkland on throwing mobile phones and the need for good manners. Well, that's it from Tuesday in Parliament. The Lords is sitting for one more day, but the Commons has broken up for the Christmas recess. Although there won't be a daily roundup until the new year, it's only good manners to point out that Alicia McCarthy will be here on Wednesday night with a review of the last few months of the year. But from me, Christina Cooper, it's goodbye for now and a very happy Christmas.